Hello everyone. Here I am at Ashburnham Place at the Clarkson Academy, and I have with me Scott Klusendorf. And in this session, Scott, you're going to be talking about staying in the driving seat, aren't you?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Let me define what an apologist is. Men and women, we are all apologists now. The days of thinking the defense of the pro-life position can be left to a small group of professionals who do the work for us are done. We are part of a culture that accepts truth in the hard sciences only. Religion and ethics, that's all speculative, subjective opinion as far as the secular culture is concerned. In that kind of world, you cannot simply say, well, I'll let the church do the work for me. People don't accept church teaching in this culture. You can't say, I'll let the Bible do it for me, because people don't accept the Bible as a source of knowledge. What we have to be able to do is defend truth. And men and women, truth must be defended. It's not an option. Greg spoke last night saying that one of the problems we face with clergy is they're very good on the pastoral side, very good on the love side, and lousy on the truth side. You know why we care about truth? Because we love people and they're going to perish without it. And that means we have to be willing to step up and defend truth. Here's what an apologist is. An apologist is not someone who runs around and says he's sorry all the time. That's what husbands do. Look at you ladies going, preach it, bro. Oh, we'll deal with your pride later. But an apologist makes a case for what he or she believes. And we're going to do that this weekend. In fact, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you flat out what you're going to walk away with at this session. It won't be hard for you to figure out. You're going to know it. Here's your objective. First of all, you're going to know what the pro-life case is. You're going to know what it is. One of the problems with our movement is we're off message. We're talking about abortion, but we're talking about it so broadly, people are missing what the main thing is. We're going to learn what the pro-life message is, and we're going to have a razor-sharp focus on what that message is. Second objective, you will not only learn what the pro-life case is, you will learn, get ready, you will learn how to defend it in 1 minute or less. 1 minute. By the way, that's about all the time you get in today's culture with people's attention spans. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you gone to lunch with somebody, and while you're sitting there at lunch, their phone is just beeping continually? Ever had that happen to you? Drives me insane. If you go to lunch with me, leave your smartphone home. All it does is just constantly beep. We are being interrupted continually, and we have distracted ourselves to death. Not just with entertainment now, but with literally messaging where we can be accessed at any time, anywhere. Which is why I'm kind of chuckling that the internet signal here is really weak and we can't get online. Y'all are gonna listen to me now because you're not distracted. That was my best attempt at a southern accent, which I've never picked up. But anyway, third thing we're going to do. We're not only going to learn what the pro-life message is, we're not only going to learn how to articulate it in 1 minute or less, we're going to learn a game plan for handling objections. Have you ever been on the hot seat where you feel like you're getting grilled? They're hammering you. You intolerant, bigoted Christian. You mean-spirited anti-choicer. You get some disciple of Ann Ferretti coming in and nailing you, right? We're going to learn how to turn the tables on that and do it graciously but truthfully so that we make an impact for good. That's the objectives. Those are the objectives that we're going to hit in our time together in my sessions. And let me be clear, the goal of an apologist is not to be liked. Greg was absolutely right on that. If your goal is to be liked, you're in the wrong business. What you need to do is start a self-help seminar, a prophecy seminar, a wealth-building seminar, and throw a little religion in there to sweeten the deal, and you'll be set. The goal of the apologist is not to be liked. The goal of the apologist is to be clear. That's your goal. Clarity is preferable to agreement. Clarity is preferable to agreement. Your job is to be clear. Your second job as an apologist is to simply make your case and not worry about winning the debate on the spot. Apologetics is not like, have you ever seen those old, this is terribly American, forgive me, but those old Clint Eastwood Western movies, you know, you get a gunfight in the street and whoever draws first wins, and if you don't draw first, you're dead. That's kind of a steep defeat price, but that's not apologetics. Apologetics is not about gunning people down and winning on the spot. You will sometimes, but that's really not the goal. Your goal is to give them something to think about. My colleague Greg Kokel says it's putting a pebble in a person's shoe. You ever had a pebble in your shoe when you're out walking? What happens? It wears on you and wears on you until you deal with it. That's what our job is. Give them something to think about. It is not necessary to close the deal on the spot. Third thing you're going to want to do as an apologist is you're going to want to engage in an artful manner. An artful manner. You cannot water down the pro-life message. You cannot tailor it so that it's more palatable to people, thinking, well, they'll like me better. I get that. You cannot do that. Here's what you can do, though. You can be artful in that you defy expectations. Emily, Mike, and I were on a train 2 days ago going from London Paddington to Windsor. And across the aisle from us was a woman in her 60s, and she struck up a conversation with us, and she asked the question, what are you here for? And I said, well, I'm here for the Clarkson Academy. It's a pro-life apologetics event. And she looked right at us and said, see this face? And gave us a frown. That was her answer. Now, she was a university professor in economics and sociology. So do the math. Is that going to be someone typically on our side of the issue? Probably not. And she said, she looks at Mike and looks at me and says, you people have an awful lot to apologize for. Meaning Christianity, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the witch hunts, you know, all that. You have an awful lot to apologize for. Now, I could have, if I wanted to, looked at her and said, are you out of your mind? Do you know the millions of people killed in the name of atheism? Let's talk about Mao. Let's talk about Pol Pot. Let's talk about Stalin. Institutional atheism has destroyed millions of lives. I didn't go there. Instead, we just listened and we engaged. And I said, you know what? You're right. We do have some things to apologize for. And you're right. The followers of Christ have not always lived up to what we're supposed to live up to. She's like, yeah, you got that right, man. Well, she didn't quite put it in Americanese like that, but you get the idea. Then we went right for the heart of the issue. Whether Christianity is true or false does not hinge on the behavior of individual Christians, though we should behave correctly as Christians. Christianity stands or falls on one thing. What is it? The resurrection of Jesus Christ. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, if Christ rose from the dead bodily and historically, we got a game on. If he didn't, we're dead in our sins, we are the world's biggest joke, and we have no hope. Everything comes back to the resurrection. That's where we went with her. And she's, oh, that's just myth. The Christian resurrection, there's all kinds of resurrection stories. Again, I've got 8 minutes on a train. I am not going to bring this woman to the sinner's prayer on an 8-minute train ride. So I left her with a question to think about. I said, really? The Christian resurrection idea is no different? Why would anyone believe that Christian resurrection is no different than all these other myths? And her mouth kind of drops open and she goes, well, that's a good question. That's dropping a pebble in her shoe. Did she know the least little bit about Christian resurrection? No. If I had asked her to defend the secular myths about resurrection against the Christian myth, she wouldn't even know the difference. She wouldn't know. But she was just bluffing. And by gently dropping a pebble in her shoe, I gave her something to think about. We're going to do that on the pro-life issue in this session. We're going to talk about how we put pebbles in people's shoes to give them something to think about. I want to give you right now the 3 most important words in pro-life apologetics. Here they are. Get ready to write them down. 3 most important words. Word number 1, syllogism. You're going, what on earth is that? Let me spell it, then I'll define it. S-Y-L-L-O-G-I-S-M. S-Y-L-L-O-G-I-S-M. A syllogism is simply a series of statements that lead to a conclusion, a formal argument. So let me give you an example. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Premise, premise, conclusion. That's a syllogism. It leads to a logical concluding point. Second most important word in pro-life apologetics. You ready? Syllogism. Some of you are going, the coffee ain't kicking in yet. No. Anybody want to guess what the third most important word is? Syllogism. Boy, these British audiences, they are bright. Okay, now, why would I do that? I'll tell you why. Nobody that you're talking to out there in the non-Christian world, or even the Christian world, that is not with us on the pro-life issue, honestly wants to engage you on the merits of your argument. You know what they want to do? Distract you. Bring up all kinds of things that have nothing to do with the issue at hand. And the way you're going to stay focused is to stay on message. And the way you stay on message is remember your syllogism. What is your syllogism? Here's the pro-life syllogism. You can write it down. It's very easy. Here is our pro-life argument. Premise 1. It is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. You could just put P1 in a dash. P1. It is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. Premise 2. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Conclusion? What's the conclusion going to be? Therefore, it is wrong. Therefore, abortion is morally wrong. It is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. Abortion intentionally kills innocent human beings. Therefore, abortion is wrong. Now, you know why that's so critical? You now know what your argument is. And when they try to bring up things that don't refute that argument, and there's 2 ways you can refute an argument. You can show the premises are unsound, meaning not true, or you can show the logic doesn't follow. If they don't do that, your argument stands. But too often what happens is we get into discussions with people about abortion. And instead of staying anchored to our syllogism, we take the bait and we get distracted and our critics run us down rabbit trails ad infinitum. Well, what about war? You're against all killing? What about war? Now, stop right there. Our argument wasn't that it's always wrong to kill. Our argument wasn't that it's always wrong to kill human beings. What was our argument? It's always wrong to do what? intentionally kill innocent human beings. Right? They're making an argument we're not making. That's called a straw man. They're attacking something we haven't argued. By keeping your syllogism in your mind, you remember that. Now when they try to distract you, you don't take the bait. You gently remind them, excuse me, let's review something. I had laid out a very carefully thought out syllogism that it's wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings, that abortion does that, therefore it's wrong. I'm wondering, could you show me where my logic goes wrong? It's a distraction. That's all it is. They're not trying to engage you. You've got to pull them back on message and help them see what's really at stake in this debate. And that's why your syllogism is so, so important. Let me give you an example of this in the secular culture. Before we moved from Los Angeles to Atlanta in 2004, I had my youngest son, Michael, at the park, and I was pushing him on the swing. He was 6 at the time. And as I was pushing him on the swing, a well-dressed woman put her daughter in the swing next to Michael, and she asked the question, what do you do for a living that you can come to the park in the middle of the day when most dads are away having to work? Now, honestly, I'm not one that wants to get into it with people when I'm not on the job working. I'd rather just chill, be cool. So I usually give a cop-out answer. Well, I do lectures on bioethics. Nobody ever asks what that is. She said, do you talk about abortion? Yeah. Now we're into it. And I'm willing to bet you 10 pounds. Pro-life Christian gambling, film at 11. Yeah, I'm willing to bet 10 pounds you've heard exactly what she said. She said, I don't like abortion. What was the next word out of her mouth? But, see, you have heard it. Phew, my money's safe. But I'm glad it's legal because I don't want to impose my personal beliefs on others. Is that a pretty common thing we all hear in the Western world? I don't care if it's the UK, Canada, US, this is pretty standard fare. Dare we say a distraction? So it was time for me to disrupt her attempt to distract. And I asked a very simple question. Tell me why you're personally opposed to abortion. Because that's what she was telling me, that she personally opposed it, but wanted it to remain legal. Why are you personally opposed? She didn't hesitate. Well, it kills a baby. Everybody knows that. I followed up very gently. Can I repeat what you just told me? You personally oppose abortion because it kills a baby, but you want it to be legal to kill babies. And there's a pause. And to her credit, after several seconds, she says, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? And I don't like how it sounds when you take the spin off it. She had bought into the notion that moral truth on an issue like abortion is no more true with a capital T than your favorite flavor of ice cream. You like chocolate, she likes vanilla. Who are we to judge? Now, in a little bit, I'm going to talk directly about relativism, the idea that there are no moral rules, it's all up to us, because that is, I think, the number one challenge to Christianity and the pro-life view in the Western world today. We'll talk about how we handle that as Christians. But notice what she did. She didn't engage in the argument. She just distracted it to personal morality. This is what we are up against, men and women, and my thesis for you today is this. You can make a persuasive case for life if you do three things. Number one, simplify what the issue is. Simplify the issue. Number two, and I hope I don't step on any toes here, get ready, make a secular case for the pro-life view based on science and philosophy. We will use our Bibles, don't worry. But at least initially, we're going to lay out a case that they cannot dismiss as mere religious opinion. You and I accept religious truth as real and knowable. The culture out there does not. So let's go ahead and engage them on their turf, at least initially, and then draw them into our universe. Third thing, simplify, make your case, and artfully handle objections. This is how we win. If we can hit those benchmarks, we win. You may not win with a conversion on the spot, but you will win in giving somebody something to think about. So let's talk about how we simplify this issue. They don't usually step up and say, let me give you 5 arguments why the unborn aren't human, and you tell me where they're wrong. They don't do that. They simply assume the unborn aren't human without even arguing for it. Chosen, do you have a brother? Do you have a sister? Do you have a best friend? Okay. Is that best friend in the room? No. Okay. Chosen, have you stopped insulting your best friend yet? He's thinking about it. Have you? No, you haven't. Would you all extend your hand? We're going to pray for this brother right now. We need deliverance.
I know he's.
He's played along with a gig here. What was unfair about my question? What did I assume?
You assumed that he was doing down his best friend.
I assumed that he insults his best friend. Did I give one shred of evidence that he did that? I just assumed it. President Barack Obama, a U.S. example here, on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade 2 years ago, this is the Supreme Court case that gave us abortion on demand in the U.S. The President of the United States said, and I'm going to paraphrase for brevity, today is a day that we celebrate for all Americans. Now listen to the President's rationale. Because this is a country where everyone deserves to pursue their own dreams. What was just assumed about the unborn? That they're not human. Did the president give any evidence at all to show the unborn weren't human? No. He just assumed it. In 1998, Prime Minister Tony Blair defended embryonic stem cell research. This is killing embryos for medical research in hopes that their cells will treat disease in other people. And Tony Blair, echoing and sounding very much like many of our own politicians from my country, said the following: if Britain is to stay ahead on the scientific curve, we cannot allow other nations to get ahead of us on this research. We must let science do its job. What did he just assume about the embryos in question?
They're not human.
They're not human. By the way, you know what he just justified?
No.
The Tuskegee experiments. This is a horrible blotch on my country's history. Starting in the 1940s, the U.S. government sponsored research where they took African American men who were dying of syphilis and promised to cure them, only they gave them sugar pills. Because the real point of the experiment was to study how the disease killed these men, not make them well. This went on till the early 1960s. All in the name of, we shouldn't let morality get in the way of science. Would anybody in my country have tolerated that if the patient were a white man? Only by assuming the black man wasn't one of us could that be justified. And this is what happens in the abortion debate time and time again. People simply assume the unborn aren't human. They don't argue for it. So let me give you some examples. You're talking to somebody out at a display. You're out along Whitehall there, and along comes a person who does not support your view, and they say things like the following: well, why do you want to force your moral views on everybody? What did they just assume about the unborn that they wouldn't assume about, say, a toddler? that the unborn are not human, right? Because would they argue you shouldn't force your morality if someone wanted to protect toddlers from being killed intentionally? No. They only do that with fetuses because they're assuming they're not human. So how are you going to simplify this debate for people? How are you going to help them understand that the real issue is not forcing morality? The real issue is, what is the unborn? That's the real issue. How are you going to do that? Well, we're going to use a little tactic that some of you that are alumnus of the Clarkson Academy will remember. We call this Trot Out the Toddler. Let me explain what Trot Out the Toddler is. It is not a slam dunk, end the debate, no one will object, everybody will fall on the ground and worship your intellect because you use it. That's not what's going to happen here. What will happen is you will frame the debate around the issue that needs to be discussed, which is, what is the unborn? So somebody comes to you and says, why do you want to force your morals on people? You're not going to panic. You're not going to get defensive. You're not going to get chatty at that point. You're going to do one thing. The first words out of your mouth, the very first words out of your mouth will be the following. I have a 2-year-old here beside me. You're going to create an imaginary 2-year-old. Hold your hand out about knee high. Pretend I have a 2-year-old in front of me. His parents intend to kill him in the privacy of the home, and they're telling you, you have no right to force your views on others. Should we honor their objection? What will their answer be? No, you can't do that. Your reply is just 2 words. Why not? Well, because he's a human being. Your reply will then be 1 word, said melodically. Ah. Some of you will do that better than me when I sing Things Die, but you get the idea. Ah what? Well, if the unborn are human, we shouldn't be killing them in the name of not forcing our morality any more than we'd kill a 2-year-old for that reason. Oh, but that's different. The unborn aren't human, the toddler is. That's the first question we need to resolve. Now, let me be clear. This is not, again, the end of the debate. There are some people who look you in the eye and say, yeah, it is human, I'll kill it anyway. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But to start the conversation with about 90% of the people you're going to encounter on the street, most of their objections assume the unborn aren't human. Most. Not all, but almost all. You're going to start by simplifying the debate. The debate is not about forcing morality. It's not about privacy. It's about one question: what is the unborn? On the London Underground, at virtually every tube station now, there is a sign, an advertisement, a sign with a picture of a guy. Sometimes he's got a scarred up face. Sometimes it's obvious he's been through some rough stuff in life. And the caption reads the following: I don't know what I would have done without my public services. Right there. Everybody sees it. These signs are everywhere along the tube network. And the idea there being that, well, of course, that's a human being. Of course we'd want services. But when it comes to the unborn, caring for the unborn, people don't do that. They simply assume. And so you're going to humanize the unborn by making that the issue. You're actually not going to humanize them yet. You're going to make sure that's the question we're talking about. So let's try one together. Somebody comes to you and says, well, you're going to ask that poor woman who can't have any more kids. She's already got 12 kids from 12 different men. She's not married to any of those men. She's got 12 kids. She can't afford anymore. And you're going to force her to bring another child into this world she can't afford. How cruel of you. First thing you're going to do is hold your hand out at knee high. You knew this was coming, did you not? I have a 2-year-old in front of me. His parents can't afford to feed him. Would it be okay to execute the 2-year-old so the parents' checkbook can balance at the end of the month? What's the answer going to be? No, you can't do that. Your reply? Those of you that said, you're too anxious. Those of you that said, why not, you're right on message. Why not? Because he's a human being. You guys are good. You're really good. See, no one would argue we can execute that homeless guy on the wall of the tube station because he's an economic drain on us. But they'll sure do that with the unborn. Why? Because they're assuming, not arguing, they're assuming the unborn are not human, like that guy on the wall at Elephant and Castle. It's an assumption. C.S. Lewis said the most dangerous ideas in the culture are those that are simply assumed. The real threat to us is not Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, all right, he's an okay scientist. He's a lousy philosopher. He has no business doing philosophy. He has no credentials for it. Alvin Plantinga put it real well. He said, I'm tempted to say that Richard Dawkins is a sophomoric philosopher, but that would be unfair to sophomores. The real danger is not Dawkins. It's the ideas the culture simply assumes. And your job as an apologist is to flush those ideas out into the open so we're looking at them honestly and not simply assuming. Let's try one more. You help me out with it. You're talking to someone along Whitehall. You're there with the Abort 67 display. Somebody comes along, walks up to your signs, and says, you know, I just don't understand. Why do you hate women? You just want a war on women. Why don't you trust women to make their own personal decisions? Why don't you trust them? And right away you're thinking, how do I make this person understand I don't hate women? Wrong question. What's the first thing you're going to do? There you go. I got the whole front row doing this, man. Surfboard pose at Malibu. All right, I got a 2-year-old in front of me. His parents want to rough him up in the bedroom. They want us to trust their own personal decisions. Should we allow them to do it? What will the answer be? No, you can't do that. Your reply? Why not? Well, because he's a human being. Now, we have just brought the debate back to the one issue we need to be talking about. What is the unborn? That may not be the only question in the debate, but it's the first question. What is the unborn? We're going to focus like a laser beam on that question. And we're not going to allow people to simply assume the unborn are not human. So let's go ahead now and answer our question. We have raised it. We've asked the question, what is the unborn? What do? We're going to answer it. Question, where am I going to go to get my answer? Am I going to the Bible?
No, that stage.
Am I going to the Book of Common Prayer?
No.
Heard somebody say, I hope not.
Science.
Am I going to the teaching magisterium of the Catholic Church? No. Now, I could go to all of those places eventually, but not yet. I'm going to go to the one place we go when we ask an empirical question. When we ask the question, what is the unborn? That is not a religious question. Here's what is a religious question. How do we value human beings regardless of their stage of development? That is inherently a religious question. But the question, what kind of thing is the unborn? We don't do metaphysics to answer that. We do science. We go to the empirical evidence, and here's what we find out. From the earliest stages of development, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. From the earliest stages of development, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. Let me unpack for you what that means. You were distinct. You were not part of another human being. You were yourself, a living, separate entity. You were living. Dead things don't grow, do they? Distinct, living, and whole. What that means is the kind of thing you were was not in question, though you were small, immature, and had yet to fulfill your functioning abilities. The kind of thing you were was not in question, even at that stage. You were a distinct, living, and whole human being. This is the science of embryology. And by the way, this is not up for grabs. It's not up for grabs. People who say to you, well, scientists don't all agree about when life begins, if they don't know when life begins, I wonder just what degree their science has gotten to. Because this is settled stuff. I will go over some objections to it. But you need to know that the literature is on your side, not your critics. The real debate is over how we value the embryo, which we'll get to next session. But the question, what is it, is really quite simple. The unborn is a distinct, living, whole human being. That's the science of embryology. Everybody hold your hand up like this. Start pinching cells off the back of your hand. Give yourself a good pinch. If your neighbor isn't doing it, grab something off the back of his neck and, wake him up, all right? All right. Congratulations. You just sent a couple of hundred somatic cells hurling to their deaths on the lap in front of you. Now get ready, this may be disturbing. All right? Every one of those cells that you just sent plummeting to their demise contains your DNA encoding. Did you just commit mass homicide? One dude in the back's going, wait a minute, I don't know. Seriously, you did not. Why not? You're right, exactly. These cells on the back of my hand are merely part of a larger human entity, me. They are not distinct whole human beings the way you were at the embryonic stage, the way I was at the embryonic stage. There is a difference in kind between each of our bodily cells and the embryonic human beings we once were. That's the science of embryology. Of course, there will be people who bring up objections. And you can imagine what some of them might be. So let's just work through some of these before we take a break. And you'll see what I mean about these objections. The first objection goes like this. Well, that embryo could split into two. You could have an embryo and then before 21 days it splits into two. We have twins. How can you claim that that is a whole human being when it can split into two up until 18, 21 days maybe? Question. How does it follow that because a living entity splits, that it wasn't a whole living entity prior to the split? I'm going to betray my ignorance here, but do we have flatworms in the UK? Flatworms. Okay. We have these things in the US called flatworms, and you can cut them in half, and guess what you get when you cut a flatworm in half? Two flatworms. Do you have worms similar to that here? Tapeworms. How many of you have cut a tapeworm in half? Or how many of you have cut a worm in half and got two before? Mass killers, identify yourselves. Okay, now, you see how easy that was? Man, I'll tell you. I told you this seminar would be about clarity. When you cut a particular worm in half, we'll say flatworm in my country, you get two. Does it follow there was no flatworm prior to the split? So the fact that the embryo may split doesn't mean it wasn't a whole living entity prior to the split.
You can do that with starfish.
Well, you can do that with what?
Starfish.
Starfish? Okay, same principle. Just because you divide the starfish doesn't mean it wasn't a whole starfish prior to it, even if it does become two starfish. Good example, thank you. You'll get this objection. Well, that embryo mustn't be something that's a big deal because after all, nature triggers a ton of abortions. Women miscarry up to 1/3 of all pregnancies. How can you claim that embryo is one of us that we should be concerned about when nature seems to be the biggest abortionist in the universe? Or maybe, if your critic is really sarcastic, he'll look at you and say, God's the biggest abortionist in the world, because he's causing all these miscarriages. Question: how does it follow that because nature spontaneously triggers a miscarriage, that A, the embryos in question are not human, or B, I may intentionally kill them? There are provinces in India, I'm told, where up to 1/3 of all children who are born die within a month after birth from malnutrition and disease. They die sooner rather than later. Does it follow those children are not fully human because they die sooner rather than later? Or that we may intentionally kill them because of it? Remember our argument. Our argument is it's wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. How does miscarriage justify the intentional killing of an innocent human being? There are earthquakes in third world countries that kill thousands. Does that justify mass murder? These are silly arguments, but we get them. We get them. Here's another one. Women don't grieve miscarriages the way that they grieve the deaths of older children, newborns, toddlers, and the like. I'm going to make a suggestion here that you not take the bait on that one. The bait would be this: oh yes, they do. I know women who have grieved miscarriages. And you know what? You're right. Lots of women grieve them, and grieve them deeply. In fact, it's rather insensitive of our critic to just assume women don't grieve miscarriages. I mean, talk to a woman who's had one, you'll probably hear a very different story. Right at that moment, though, we don't want to go there, because really the grief is not the issue. The issue is, what is the unborn? Suppose I got a text message during the break indicating that one of my children back home had died. Am I going to feel worse about that than hearing that 300 children died in Pakistan today? Of course. Why? Because that's my kid, right? But here's the thing. Is my kid more human than those children? My feelings about something don't change what it is. Thank you. I felt like I was on the old Gong Show. You give a wrong answer, you get a... Did you have the Gong Show over here? Anyway, you know, you get buzzed out. My feelings about something don't change the kind of thing it is. The question is, what kind of thing is the embryo? That's the issue. Here's another one. Well, that embryo doesn't look like us. You're right. You're right. In fact, can we admit as pro-lifers, let's be honest, if you saw a picture, a microscopic picture of a ball of 10 cells, and we're told that's a human embryo, do you immediately identify with that as one of us? No. Our intuitions, though they are credible at the default level, are not infallible. They can be challenged. And this is one of those cases where our intuitions need to be challenged. You look at that ball of cells and you think, that doesn't look like me. You're right. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to tell it being any different from a cow embryo or a dog embryo. The question, though, is not what an entity looks like, but what it is. The Western world is full of atrocious examples of people judging human value based on appearance. In my country, you had chattel slavery. In your country, before William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson and others, you had slave trade that was vicious. All justified on the grounds that that slave doesn't look like us. You don't want to go there in terms of valuing human beings based on appearance. The track record alone should give us pause. Virtually every act of genocide in the world's history has been justified because those people don't look like our people. That's the grounds for it. You don't want to go there. Meanwhile, a mannequin in a storefront window might look human but isn't remotely so. Right? But here's a way you can help inform people's intuitions. And as soon as I finish this point, we'll take a stretch break. Help them look back rather than forward. Help them look back rather than forward. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. Do any of you that are over the age of, say, 50, remember the first generation Polaroid cameras? Okay, for those of you that are youngsters, let me tell you what the Polaroid camera was. In the dark ages, before there were smartphones and digital photography, what your parents had to do is they would shoot pictures and it would record on this stuff called film. You would shoot 36. We got a bit of nostalgia back here. You know, this guy's going, oh, bring back those days. You may not want to when I finish here. You would shoot 36 shots, and some rolls of film had 24, I believe, but usually 24 or 36. You would wait till you'd shot all the pictures, because if you pulled the film out beforehand, it would expose all the pictures you'd taken. You then drove your film to the corner, at least in the States you did this, you drove your film to the corner of the supermarket at Tesco's. Way in the back corner there'd be this little booth called Photomat. You'd drop the film off. You would wait a month and half your pictures would come back overexposed. Young people, those were the dark dinosauric days before digital photography. I don't know how we survived them. We read books actually, but that aside, Polaroid cameras were the first attempted cure for that problem. The Polaroid camera was not very attractive. It was quite ugly. Would you not agree? It looked like something Satan developed. But it had a key advantage. You would shoot the picture, and instead of waiting 30 days, it would spit out a piece of paper. You would wave it. You would wait about a minute and a half, and your picture emerged. Now, Polaroids have made a comeback, in case you're wondering, but these were the first editions. I want you to pretend it is 1970, and we are on a Mexican safari. And to borrow an example from Richard Stith, we are on a Mexican safari, you have your Polaroid camera, and you just happen to snap a photo of a black jaguar leaping across the trail in front of us. You got it. National Geographic's going to pay you big bucks for that pic. And while you're waiting for that picture to emerge, I come up behind you and rip it out of your hands and tear it up. Are you mad at me? Yeah, absolutely. What if I said to you, what's the big deal? That was just a white paper with a brown smudge on it. Would that satisfy you? You would look at me incredulous and you would say, are you out of your mind? The jaguar in the picture was already there. We just couldn't see him yet. In the same way, men and women, you were already there from the beginning. We just couldn't see you. Imagine your favorite Uncle Bill. You go to Uncle Bill's house, to borrow another example from Stith. And as you walk into his dining room, there on the dining room table is a photograph framed of what looks like just a ball of 10 cells. And you go, Uncle Bill, what's that? He goes, well, that was me when I was an embryo. You look at it and say, gee, you weren't any better looking then than you are now. I mean, you'd immediately identify that with Uncle Bill, wouldn't you? Immediately. This is what I mean about helping people look back rather than forward. Our intuitions can be mistaken, but the science of embryology is clear, men and women. From the earliest stages of development, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. That's the facts of science. People can try to dismiss that as religious. You're not going to let them. You're going to go back to your syllogism. It is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. Abortion intentionally kills innocent human beings. Therefore, abortion is wrong. Are we the only ones who call abortion intentional killing? No, we're not actually. Dr. Warren Hearn, author of Abortion Practice, to a Planned Parenthood conference. This is the guy who, by the way, wrote the medical teaching text that teaches abortion techniques used worldwide, runs the Boulder Abortion Clinic. Here's what he said to a Planned Parenthood conference. He's talking about how staff react to abortion procedures, principally the D&E procedure. And here's what Hearn says. He says, quote, "We have reached a point in this particular technology where there is no possibility of denying an act of destruction. It is before one's eyes. The sensations of dismemberment flow through the forceps like an electric current." Does that sound like intentional killing of a living human being? Yeah, it does. Listen to this. Ronald Dworkin, in his book, Life's Dominion. Ronald Dworkin is a leftist, was a leftist professor, not pro-life. And even in defending abortion, he was honest. He said the following: "Abortion deliberately kills a developing embryo and is a choice for death." Doesn't that sound just like our second premise? Abortion is the intentional killing of an innocent human being? Not because we say so, men and women. The other side is conceding this. All right, let's go on. The president of Planned Parenthood worldwide a decade ago, Faye Wattleton, said the following: "I think we have deluded ourselves into believing that people don't know that abortion is killing. So any pretense that abortion is not killing is a signal of our ambivalence, a signal that we cannot say, yes, it kills a fetus." That is not a pro-life religious figure saying that. That is the former president of Planned Parenthood. For those of you that may not be as familiar with Planned Parenthood, think BPAS over here. Imagine Ann Ferretti, who, by the way, will say this. I will show you this later. Camille Paglia, feminist icon worldwide. Quote, "Hence, I have always frankly admitted that abortion is murder, the extermination of the powerless by the powerful." Whoa! It gets better. Liberals, for the most part, have shrunk from facing the ethical consequences of their embrace of abortion, which results, listen to this, which results in the annihilation of concrete individuals and not just clumps of insensate tissue. Whoa. You don't need to go to a religious figure to get this stuff. It's right there. And it's in your notes. And you shall have it if you stick around. Our case is sound, men and women. We've got to simplify it. And the way we simplify it is to first focus public attention on the question, what is the unborn? We don't get distracted. We remember our syllogism. So let's recite our syllogism together. The doors are locked. Nobody's leaving till we get this, all right? What is premise one? It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. What is premise two? Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, is wrong. There you go. We're going to stick to that like glue.